Hello, you're watching the Sunbeam Alpine channel on YouTube, and the video we're going to show you today is something which just about every Alpine owner will have to do at some time. It's about how to seal the petrol tanks. Now this video was filmed by Ian Marchant. We're very grateful to him for doing that, and he followed a process that we first followed over 20 years ago on two of our Alpines. It's well worth doing it exactly as Ian shows. You won't be disappointed. You'll know if you've got petrol tank problems because you'll be getting little bits of rubbish come up into your carburettor, your filters will be getting blocked, and you'll generally be having running problems. Clean and reseal the petrol tanks, put an inline filter in the pipe between the petrol tanks and the petrol pump, and suddenly a lot of the problems with carburation will disappear. The front of each fuel tank is located by two bolts. You get to the two bolts through the rear wheel arch. You need to undo both of these to release the front of the tank. The rear of the tank bolts in here to a panel that is itself bolted in top and bottom behind the trim piece that's here. It bolts in up here and it bolts in down here. That will hold the back of the tank. It's the same both sides. You need to undo those bolts, and then when you've taken the rubber grommets off and the filler pipe and the balance pipe, you can wiggle both tanks out of the rear wings. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let's hand over to Ian.
Okay guys, so this is going to be a video about renovating your fuel tanks on a Series 3 to Series 5 Sunbeam Alpine, that being the dual fuel tank system. My name is Ian, I'm a member of the club, otherwise known as Lofty 2012 on the forum. And this is Katie, my Series 5 1966 GT. So I'll be taking you through the process of doing the tanks. I'm doing them on this car because it's having a ground up restoration. I did a full rotisserie restoration on it. And now I've got to the fuel system. So I just thought it was a no-brainer to do the seal the tanks while I was at it. Although, to be honest, when I looked inside, they weren't that bad. But now they're out, I might as well get them sealed. So I'll be taking you through the process, and I hope you enjoy the video. Okay guys, so once you've wrangled the tanks out of the car, this is what you're going to have. Twin tanks, obviously on the Series 3 to Series 5. The offside rear tank in the UK, which is the filler tank. The near side rear tank, which is the one that's got the sender unit in it. You've got your cross pipe and link pipes. You've got your vent pipe, and then you've got your filler neck. Okay, so pretty straightforward. You put the fuel into your filler tank there. It passes down through these cross pipes and link pipes, goes into the opposing tank, which so that fills up at the same rate as your main tank. The air pressure that builds up in this tank needs somewhere to escape to, so that's why you've got this vent pipe attachment or spigot there, which is linked to this pipe here, which goes around the back of your boot space and then links up to your filler neck using that connection on the right hand side there. Now, when you're taking all this stuff out of your car and renovating your tanks, it sort of makes sense to replace all the rubber perishable items. which in most cases are going to be 60 plus years old. So what I did for mine was that I bought these connectors from a company called Forest Customs in the UK. I'm sure they're not the only ones that supply these items, so you can go elsewhere. These were okay for me, and they're also obviously available from suppliers in the US as well. They're connected to the pipes using these fittings here. These are the original ones that came off the car, so I'm going to reuse those. Obviously, if you want to use nice new sparkly ones, then fine, but these were perfectly serviceable, so I didn't see any reason why not to use them. The filler neck is the one that actually came with the car. I'm not sure that it's the original one, but in any case, I've bought a replacement for it, so I won't be using this one. And then with the vent pipe, it just makes sense to replace this. I mean, it shouldn't be in direct contact with fuel anyway. It should only be like fuel vapor going through there. But I've gone for some SAE J30R9 fuel injection hose, which has got a 9.5 millimeter internal diameter, which is a really nice snug fit over that spigot there. I did actually trial fit this, and I had to warm the end of the pipe up with a heat gun to get it to go over. So it's going to be a nice firm seal on there. So basically, that's the system that we're going to be restoring, resealing the tanks and resealing the cross pipes. So the obligatory health and safety disclaimer. When you're doing this job, you're going to be dealing with some pretty toxic, nasty chemicals. So just keep yourself safe and wear protective equipment. Now, as an absolute minimum, what you're going to be requiring are some gloves. Now, you really ought to be using chemically resistant gloves for this job, but I have to admit I didn't. I just use ordinary work gloves. I wouldn't recommend that, so probably worth getting some chemically resistant gloves. Safety goggles, obviously, and then a pair of overalls. Like I say, it's a mucky job, and this stuff tends to go everywhere really, so you don't want to be ruining your clothes. Preferably use some overalls that are slightly cleaner than mine on this shot here. But this is what I used, and bear in mind I'm making this video after actually having done the tanks, so what I'm telling you is what I actually did and what proved successful for me. Tools and materials required for doing this job, well, at least this is what I used. Now, you're probably going to be quite surprised by the presence of a couple of wheelie bins and a broom handle, but basically this is what I came up with for actually suspending the tanks and the cross pipes while they were draining after I'd put the sealant on them. Worked out really well. They're just the right height really, and if you notice with this particular design of wheelie bin anyway, it's got this handle recess there, which is ideal for putting the broom handle in across, spanning the two obviously, and then it worked out at just the right height for me. So by all means go your own way with that, but that's what worked out for me. Now, on a similar theme, the metal hooks there are basically what I use to suspend them from the broom handle. Now, you can make these out of just a bit of coat hanger, or I just found these in a box in the shed. I'm not sure where I got them from, but they turned out to be ideal. Now, the other thing you're going to need is plenty of this sort of thing, these plastic containers, quite wide diameter ones. This is what I put underneath the tanks and the cross pipes while they were the sealant was dripping out, basically, to reclaim as much as I could. Ideal really, because they're the sort of thing that you can use once and then chuck away. Because believe me, don't use any container that you think you might want to use again, because as you can see, it makes a right mess of them, and you're never going to get them properly clean again. So And that goes with a lot of things that I've used on this project. It's messy stuff, this tank sealer. It's really super adhesive, as you would want it to be, but that means it also sticks to everything else. So messy job. And while we're talking about that, now I know I've already mentioned PPE, but I thought it was worth mentioning that you are going to get through several pairs of gloves during this job. I certainly did. I think I used about 7 or 8 different pairs in the end, because it's just messy stuff, and as soon as it gets on the gloves, it's not just a question of wiping it off because it just sticks to it. So I had to change gloves several times during the course of the project so that I didn't get the sealant spread over everything else. Also have plenty of rags. We were lucky here because my wife was getting rid of a load of old towels, and that's really ideal for this sort of thing. They're really super absorbent, and you just, once you've used them, you just chuck them away. Right, so the other things that I found useful were, I think that's like a wood clamp and also a exhaust clamp. Now the cross pipes, some of them, or the link pipes, some of them have got holes drilled in the end. I know I've got a set with a hole drilled in, which looks like it's factory to me, and another set that hasn't. Now, obviously, if you've got a hole drilled in the end, it's ideal for hanging up using those hooks that I've already described. But if you haven't got anything, then I found these were ideal for clamping onto the pipe. The exhaust clamp there is exactly the right diameter to fit around the link pipes, and then you can obviously put the hook onto that, and similarly the large wood clamp that I've had there. So I used both of those, and it got me out of trouble there when I found that I didn't have any holes in some of the cross pipes. The rather weird looking tool here is what I use to get inside the tanks and to give them a good scouring up, either before a process or subsequent to it. And basically it's just a bit of copper pipe with some wire wool there, coarse wire wool, which I wrapped a bit of wire around. I think it was a coat hanger. Yeah, it actually was a coat hanger. And then shoved the coat hanger inside the pipe and then crimped it. So basically that allows you to get this tool right inside the tanks into all the inaccessible areas and give them a good scrubbing down, which you'll need to do at several points during this process. This tool here was really good. It's an LED light with an adjustable sort of spring attachment on it, which allows you to bend it into different angles. You can get right inside the tank and make sure that you've got all the coverage that you need. So that came in really handy. A hot air gun, obviously, because you're going to need to, at several points in this process, wash the tanks out after you've done a particular process. And then obviously the subsequent process after that is going to need them to be dry. So I mean, I'm dealing with some quite warm weather at the moment, but even so, you're never going to get them dry quick enough unless you want this project to last for weeks. So a hot air gun or a hairdryer, I would recommend investing in a hot air gun, to be absolutely honest with you, because you get much higher temperatures with it, and it's not going to burn out like last thing you want to do is burn out your wife's best hairdryer. So yeah, that wasn't particularly expensive. It's a Parkside one which I got from Lidl, so that's worked out really well. And then you're probably also going to be surprised to see a vacuum cleaner. Well, this old Dyson is a right old trooper. It was going to get hoofed down to the local tip, basically. It still works, but it's really obsolete. But I decided to hang on to it and use it for jobs around the garage and in the shed and what have you. Now, particularly when you're using this scourer to scour up the inside, I mean, you're going to have loose bits of rust, paint, whatever, floating around inside your tank. So the easiest way to get them out is, I found, using a vacuum cleaner like this. And what I've done is I've modified it with a bit of garden hose and just taped that over the end. The actual fitment on the vacuum is small enough to get inside the tank openings anyway, and then the hose just gets you into all those little inaccessible areas and just sucks up all that debris. Found that really useful. Obviously, I don't recommend that you do this to your £200 vacuum cleaner that you use inside. But in my case, I had this handy, and it turned out to be really useful. So the only other thing to mention is the Pyrex dish, or some sort of measuring dish, which has got Fly's obviously a big fan of at the moment. Yeah, you're going to need that to measure out your quantities that you're putting into the tanks. A Pyrex one was ideal. I had this one, which was it isn't the one we use in the home, by the way. It's just a spare one, which I use in this shed for measuring out various things. So you're definitely going to need that to make sure you get your quantities right. So those were the tools that I use for this job. You might find a better way to do things and use alternatives, which is fine. But this set of tools and materials, that's what worked for me. One item that I forgot to mention on the tools, materials that you're going to need, is tape. Now, it goes without saying that when you're doing this process, you're going to be filling it up with various stages in the process of different chemicals. You don't want those just seeping out, so you're going to need to tape up the openings. I found that just ordinary packing tape worked okay, or I also use some this 3M outdoor duct tape stuff, which is a little bit more adhesive. So either of those works okay. Don't imagine that you're going to get absolutely 100% sealing it with this tape, because you're not. You are going to get a little bit of seepage, but nothing that's going to cause you any undue problems. Materials that you're going to need, or chemicals, should I say. Now, the first thing that you're going to need to do with your tanks once they're out is to give them a complete and thorough internal clean. And I used this stuff, which is engine degreaser. I used it primarily because it was the cheapest stuff I could find. It was, I think it was 10 quid shipped. And it's obviously pretty heavy duty industrial grade stuff. You can dilute it to your own requirements. I did it 50/50s, and it worked out really well on the tanks. And you certainly need to get all of that grease and residue and whatever crud is attached to the inside of your tanks off, and this is a good stuff to start that process. Now, with my tanks, they are painted on the inside. It's worth mentioning at this point that not all tanks are painted, so obviously you only need to do this process if you've got painted tanks like mine. You obviously need to get all of that paint off. In most cases, in fact, it's going to be flaking already, and half the job's already done for you because it's starting to come off by itself after 60 years. So you're going to need to strip it off. So I use this Nitromorse stuff, which is, it's been around for decades. It's pretty well known, and it was quite effective. Don't think that you're going to get every single scrap of paint off of the inside of these tanks, because you're not. There's going to be like holdout areas that just aren't going to shift. So, but this stuff will get the vast majority of it off. Then we move on to metal prep, which is another important phase before you get to the sealing stage. So I used this product from Rustbuster, which is called Clean B. Now, I've been using this for quite some time. I didn't buy it specifically for the tanks. I'd already got it in the shed that I was using to passivate rust on, any other stuff that I was renovating. It really is good stuff. I would highly recommend it. It's quite sort of toxic stuff, so refer back to my comments about PPE when you're using any of this stuff, really. And I'm sure there are other rust passivating chemicals out there that you can use. You just take your own choice, but this was one that I had, and it worked quite well. It actually converts any active rust into iron phosphate, which then gives you a surface on which you can put another coating on the top and not have to worry about the rust coming back. So certainly recommend that. Now the final stage obviously is the fuel tank sealer, and there are various other manufacturers that sell this sort of product. Most of the information I saw online was recommending Pour 15. It's a well-known brand, and it does have a lot of good reputation out there. So I decided to go for that. The only real question in my mind was what size of tin to buy. It comes in all sorts of different sizes, and I looked online to try and get advice, and there was conflicting advice really from different people. So I decided that I certainly didn't want to be in a position where I didn't have enough of this stuff. So I'd rather have too much than too little. Plus, in my particular case, which is a little bit unusual, I'm doing 2 sets of tanks and 2 sets of cross pipes, because I have a spare pair of tanks and cross pipes that I got from a car that I bought. So, you know, while I was doing the one pair for my car, I thought it was just obvious to do the other pair as well. So that's why I went for the bigger can. As it turned out, and bearing in mind I'm making this video after I've completed the project, I did use all of this. There wasn't any left, but then again I did do 2 sets of everything. So if you're just doing 1 set of tanks and cross pipes, which I think is going to be the situation for the vast majority of you, then you're not going to need a 32 fluid ounce tin. I think they come in a 24 ounce and probably go smaller than that. So if I was going to make a recommendation, I would probably go for the 24 ounce, and you'll probably have some left over with that. Okay, so those are the chemicals and products that you're going to need. These things aren't particularly cheap, obviously apart from the degreaser. So factor that into your project. You're going to have a bit of expenditure here, but it's a job that most of us are going to have to do as Alpine owners at some stage. So you just have to bite the bullet and buy the best product that you can. So let's now move on to the actual preparation of the tanks. I'll split this video into 2 segments really: the preparation of the surfaces, and then we'll get on to the actual sealing process later. I've already shown you the products that I've chosen to use, and each stage of this is really just a duplication of the previous one, basically, but with a different product. So let's just go through what we're going to have to do. So for tank preparation, the first thing you need to do is a detergent wash and flush. Each time that you do one of these stages, you're going to have to do the obvious by taping up the outlets once you've got the product inside there. So I use the higher bond tape to do the large outlet at the top there, and I found that just packing tape, although for the purposes of this video I've just done a quick slapping a bit on there, I probably would have put a bit more on than that, just to make sure that it doesn't come off. But that would seem sufficient for there, because you're not planning to have the full weight of all the contents of the chemicals on that area anyway, if you're doing the job properly. Okay, so once you've got the product inside there and you've got them taped up, first thing is detergent wash. What you need to do with these tanks is, when you've got a fairly fluid chemical like detergent degreaser, then that's going to slop around pretty easy inside these tanks, right? So basically all you do is you just manipulate it around. I did each one for about 10 minutes, to be honest, and give them a good shake, like you're shaking a martini basically, and just get that agitated on the inside, all the inside surfaces. Make sure every single aspect of these tanks is upended at some point, so that the fluid is making contact. And give them a good old splash around inside there to get all the old residues and grease off. Once you're happy with that, you've got to the stage where you want to move on, then obviously you just whip that tape off and empty it out, and then move on to the next stage. After the detergent, I actually flushed these out with a garden hose, because I didn't want any of that stuff still clinging to the surface when I started using anything else, because you don't know how these things are going to react together. So best off just after each stage to flush it out. I found the garden hose was ideal, basically. Okay, so the next stage is wire brush and prepare surface. So once I've washed the tanks out, I use the old oofa doofa tool here, which is a wire wall and a bit of copper pipe and a coat hanger, to get inside there and just agitate it around and scuff up all the surfaces, just so that when you do put the next stage, which is paint strip, that it's got it's got a head start, basically. And also you're going to take off any of the loose flaking areas in any case. So wire brush it around to prepare the surface, then move on to paint strip. And as I've already mentioned, I'm using Nitromorse on this. The way that Nitromorse works, I'm not sure whether all paint strippers are going to be the same, but with Nitromorse you need to put it all on. As I said before, tape up the once you've got it inside, tape up the openings, and then make sure it makes contact with all the interior surfaces, and probably leave the tank in various different orientations on the ground for a while so that it really seeps in. So do that for all different aspects of the tank as best you can, and leave it for like 5 to 10 minutes maybe in each aspect to make sure it's all soaked in. Then what I found was the most effective was to leave that for about 10, after you've done all that, leave it for about 5-10 minutes. And if you could see the paint, you'd see it start to bubble up, but obviously it's not quite so easy when you're dealing with the inside of these things. So 5-10 minutes, and then I went at it with the oofa doofa tool again, just to, because I think paint stripper works best when it's still actually moist on the surface, rather than, you don't want to let it dry out. So go around it with the wire brush, that's going to take up the vast majority of the paint that's on those inner surfaces. But like I said before, you're not going to get all of it. And you might have to do this process a few times until you're happy with the end result. I think I did these tanks. I think I did one of them twice and one of them 3 times actually, because each time I was flushing it out afterwards, I was still getting flakes of paint coming out. So just keep going until, when you're on your final flush, you're not really getting anything out, and that proves that anything that is going to come off has come off. So I've already touched on this after the paint strip, which depends on whether you've got the interior of your tanks painted or not. Mine were, so that's why I was required to do it. You might not be, so just check out if you've got paint on the inside or not. After the paint strip, thorough flush with clean water again, which I use the trusty old garden hose, and then dry out with a heat gun. If you're just going to leave these things in the sun, they're going to take days to dry out. So best off using a heat gun. Be aware that if you are using a heat gun, that is quite a hot temperature air that thing's emitting. So if you leave it in any one position for too long in these openings, you're gonna the area directly opposite that opening is going to start getting a lot hotter than anywhere else. And if you've got a paint finish on there that you're wanting to protect, then that's going to start bubbling if you're not careful. So just be careful with it. Don't just do it in short bursts, maybe a few minutes at a time, then let it settle a bit, and then go at it again. I found that was the best way to dry these out. Once you've got it dried out, the next thing is metal prep, which is basically just passivating the rust. Various different products out there. I'm using Rust Buster Fuzz Clean B. So again, tape up your outlets, shove the stuff in there, and then agitate it about. All of these products are quite, that I'm using, are quite liquid. So you don't have to be too precious about agitating these things about. You can do it pretty quickly, is the point I'm making, rather than doing it in slow motion or anything, because it flows, it's free flowing, and it's going to get there pretty quick wherever it's going to go. So do your metal prep. That's going to passivate the rust. And with Clean B in particular, then you need to let that dry. So, that's best done by leaving the tanks outside in the hot sun. I've been lucky in the last few days. I've had some really nice warm weather, so I've left them out on the patio there, and they soon start getting. You'd be surprised how hot they get. So after a couple of days of that, they were bone dry basically, but leaving them out all day. What I then did, because I had been warned by some people online that even though I was going to use Clean B, and I thought that would leave a passivated surface which wouldn't allow any further rusting, it did actually do a little bit of flash rusting just on the surface after I'd passivated it. So what I thought was, well, the best thing to do really is to get rid of that. So I just did a final wire brush of any of that flash rust. There wasn't, I don't want to overstate it, there wasn't very much, but there was just a few streaks here and there. So I went around it with the Oofa tool again, just to get that all out, and then used my Dyson vacuum tool with its custom attachment to vacuum everything out. So at that stage, I'm now fully prepared as far as the tanks are concerned. They've been washed out, they've been wire brushed, they've been paint stripped, they've been flushed, they've been dried out, metal prepped, and then dried out again, and then final wire brushed and vacuumed. And then you've got a surface then which is ready for the final process, which is going to be the tank sealing. So now we get to the fun part, which is actually sealing the tanks after you've been through all of that preparation and all the different stages. This is where the old wheelie bins come into their own, and the broom handle and the hooks and the plastic containers. This is the best way that I found to do it. You might find a different way. But let's just go through the stages that you're going to need to think about. Okay, so tanks must be completely dry. That's pretty obvious. You don't want to be putting expensive tank sealer onto tanks that are damp inside. So this is where leaving them out in the sunshine, getting a heat gun on them, a combination of both of the above. Just make sure it's absolutely bone dry inside there before you move to this stage. Now, I've used Pour 15 tank sealer, so I'm applying 10 fluid ounces to each tank, and that has proved to be plenty. As I said earlier in the video, I'm doing 2 sets of tanks, so I bought a 32 ounce tin, and I used all of that up. But I made sure there was a good liberal coating on the inside of these tanks. Obviously tape up the outlets, as I've shown you on the previous portion of the video. Then pour in the tank sealant. I used a Pyrex disc to measure out the right amount in each case. Tape up, once you've poured the stuff into the tanks, you've already taped up the main outlet. And once the tank sealant is in there, then obviously tape up the remaining openings in the tank. After that, move the tanks around slowly. Now, this is actually an important point. To make sure you get good coverage, you want these tanks to be moved around relatively slowly, because although the stuff that we've been using previously, the detergent and the paint stripper and all of that malarkey, is pretty fluid, more or less like water. The Pour 15, once you've mixed it up, is actually a little bit viscous. You'll notice that the actual, when you open the tin, you have to start stirring it. There's obviously like a solid conglomeration at the bottom that you have to then mix up to make sure because obviously it's settled, it's separated out. So it's, even when you've mixed it up, this stuff is a little bit on the viscous side. So it's not going to flow quite as easily as the previous stuff that you've been putting in these tanks. So to get good coverage, make sure that you move them around slowly, and make sure, just envisage the amount of sealant that you've got in the tank, where it is, and where you want it to go when you're moving these things. I know it sounds obvious, but don't just go shaking it around like you did previously as a martini cocktail. Make sure you get good coverage, including this top surface here, which means you have to have it upside down, which is why I put the high adhesion tape on the openings and on these parts of the tanks to make sure that doesn't come out, because this stuff is pretty messy stuff, and you really don't want it getting splashed around everywhere. Okay, so let's go back to the list. Right, so move tanks around slowly, ensuring good coverage. After you've done all that and you're happy that you've got good coverage, then obviously remove the tape and allow them to drain. This is where I came up with this idea of the wheelie bins and the pole and the hooks. Have them draining out over a container that will catch the excess sealant coming out, which you can then reuse. Like I say, this stuff is expensive, so you don't want to be wasting it. So I found that these plastic containers were ideal. And don't use anything that you want to use again in the future, because, you know, as you can see in the bottom there, these things make get really messed up, and you're not really going to be able to realistically use them again. So once you finish this project, they're going to be hoofed into the bin, basically. Okay, so one application should be enough of Pore 15. Certainly, I don't know about other sealants. But if you find after the first application you've had a quick look inside there and you've noticed some areas that are still bare, then obviously go for a second pour. I wouldn't leave it too long between, because you want all these, if you've got multiple applications, you want it all to bond together. So I would, if you're going to do that, I would do it more or less straight away after the first drain out, which usually takes about 30 minutes draining out, in this sort of orientation. And while we're talking about the draining orientation, I found that suspending it from this top mounting here, which is diagonally opposite where the outlet is going to give you the best draining characteristics, right? It keeps that area at the low point. So, and as I said, it takes about 30 minutes for these things to drain out. Okay, so you've coated the inside, you've drained it all out. So then you have to leave it, according to the instructions on the tin, for up to 96 hours, which is 4 days. I did mine in the outdoors. So, like I said before, we had a run of good weather here recently, nice and sunny. So I just left them out on the patio each day. And don't think that you're going to be putting these things back in your car before that. So leave at least 4 or 5 days for it to totally dry out and harden and cure before you think about putting them back in your car. And finally, don't perform this job in an unventilated space. And that goes for a lot of these materials that I've been talking about already, the different stages. Each of them are pretty toxic, nasty chemicals, giving off all sorts of noxious fumes and vapours. So you don't want to be doing it in an enclosed space, and definitely not in one of these. Right, or come to a garage. You're much better off doing it, waiting to get some decent weather forecast, and then doing it outside like I've done, and then you're not going to end up in A&E. So there you go. I mean, that's more or less it. That's the tanks anyway. We'll carry on with the video, and I'll explain how I did the cross pipes with a slightly different process on those. Guys, so we've done the tanks. Now comes the time to do the cross pipe and the connector pipes. Slightly different process here, in that these pipes I found weren't corroded at all inside, so I didn't need to do, and they weren't painted inside either. So that's just my pipes. You'll have to check out what condition yours are in. So that really negated the need for me to do any sort of paint stripping on the inside or any sort of metal prep, because there wasn't any paint and there wasn't any corrosion. So that made it a lot easier for me. What I did do was I degreased them, and I used the tool that I've shown earlier in the video, the Oofa Doofa tool, which is the wire wool on a bit of. You can just actually put it on a bit of coat hanger. You don't need the copper pipe in this instance. And I just dipped it in the degreasant, which I've got 50-50 mix, and then just rammed it back and forward in there just to clean out completely the inside of all of these pipes, to get rid of any old residue or whatever that was inside there. So once I'd got those all degreased and cleaned out, also then you have to make sure before you go to the tank sealer that you've got it completely dry in there. So I used the heat gun on mine. I just laid them on the bench vise in the shed there, and just directed the hot air down one end, and occasionally just covered up one end with a rag or a piece of metal or something to make sure the heat stays inside there, and just got them completely bone dry. You have to have everything bone dry before you put the tank sealer stuff in. Okay, so once you've done all that and you've got it all prepped ready for the sealer, then you need to figure out how you're going to get the stuff in there without it going all over the shop. So what I did was I just took the tin of the sealant and poured enough into the Pyrex dish, held the pipe over the open end of the tin, and then poured it in as I slowly rotated the pipe. And that made sure that I got a good coverage all the way around, and that any of the excess was going straight back into the tin for reuse, and I didn't waste any. And I'm not sure if you can see there, but we got a pretty good coverage in there. I'm certainly very happy with it anyway. And the same went for all three of the pipes. So this one was a little bit more difficult to do, obviously, because it's for its longer length. And you've got a projection halfway down where this outlet pipe projects out into the bore here. I think that's because if you've got any contaminants or any crud, it collects in the bottom here and doesn't get sucked in into the fuel system. Or I think it helps anyway. I think that's why they've done it that way. So that's all three pipes coated in the sealant, and then you get to the stage where you need to suspend them and drain out over about a 30-minute period. So I'll just cover how I'm going to do that in the next part of the video. Okay guys, so here's my solution to draining these cross pipes out after they've had the sealant applied. With the main cross pipe, it's pretty obvious, right? You've got an area there that you can just hoop a hook round, so no problem with that at all. This pair, my pipes didn't have the holes drilled in the end, so I had to figure out some way of suspending them. And I found that an exhaust clamp was exactly the right diameter, and that gave me one option. And then also I found this woodworking clamp that I've used on the other one. And this just gives you something to hook those loops onto to suspend them. And then, as before with the tanks, drain them into the plastic containers there for reuse if required. That concludes the project really. The same thing applies to these as with the tanks, that you need to let them dry and cure for at least 4 days before using them. Once that's all done, I'm going to be giving these a quick rub down on the outside and painting satin black just to smarten them up a little bit, and then they're ready to go back in the car. So I hope this video has been useful for you. It's a job that many of us are going to have to do at some point in our ownership of these cars. Sometimes it's forced on you because of contaminants getting into your fuel system through paint flakes or rust or whatever. And in other cases, as in mine, you're doing a full restoration of your car, and you've got the tanks out anyway, so it just makes a lot of sense just to do them while you've got them out and accessible. Um, it's a messy job, and it's not a job that I would recommend you doing if you don't need to. I can't imagine that anyone would want to do it if they didn't need to, because it is messy and it is costly getting all of the materials that you need. Um, so, if you're going to do it, then this is one way of doing it. I found it pretty effective. I didn't have any particular problems as part of the process. I did get through several pairs of gloves, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, and it's messy stuff. The sealant it sticks like bilio to everything basically. Just factor that in. Make sure you've got plenty of those sort of things put away before you start the project. And other than that, I just wish you good luck with it. It's worth doing, and I hope this is going to help you along the way. Thanks.
Well, thanks again to Ian Marchant for filming that for us. One of the things that we do lack on this channel is videos showing jobs being done on the early series cars. All of ours are series 4 or later. If you're doing a job, a mechanical job, on a series 1, 2 or 3, and you could take a little bit of time and film it on a smartphone, please drop us a line. We'd love to have a bit more footage that would help owners of the earlier cars. We really appreciate it when people take the trouble to do this filming. Thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying the Sunbeam Alpine channel. Goodbye.